President Donald Trump has launched a major combat operation against Iran alongside Israel. President Trump said this was an attempt effectively to topple the Iranian regime, which he said had soaked the earth in blood and guts. There have been reports of multiple strikes across Iran, but particularly in Tehran, hitting government ministries. We understand Ayatollah Khamenei's residence in the capital has been hit, the Ministry of Intelligence, and also an office of Iran's nuclear atomic agency. Iran has immediately struck back. Both faster and more broadly than last year in the wake of the US Midnight Hammer. Midnight Hammer was a joint US and Israeli operation to try and destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program. This operation, codenamed Epic Fury by the United States, much bigger. Iran's response also much bigger. There have been explosions reported over Jerusalem as Iran fires missiles at Israel, and just coming in, reports of explosions in Bahrain, reportedly targeting a US naval base home to the US Fifth Fleet. But that is of particular concern to the United Kingdom because the Royal Navy shares that facility or has an adjacent naval facility. There are no reports yet of any casualties. The British government has confirmed that it was not involved in the strikes this morning and said that the forward basing of military assets both to Qatar and to Cyprus were for defensive purposes only. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is due to hold an emergency Cobra meeting this afternoon, but the British government said hopes that this conflict will not escalate further. It said its first concern was for British nationals who may be endangered by this unfolding conflict, but stressed that the UK was not involved. Reports out of Israel, though, suggesting that this planning was conducted in utmost secrecy. Indeed, Israeli officials trying to go about their normal business almost right up until the point that the operation started as part of a deception plan in case anybody was monitoring them to get indicators of what was about to happen. This operation has been a long time coming, a long time in the planning. Of course, US and Iranian officials have been locked in negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. But Donald Trump, as he announced the operation, listed decades of grievances between America and Iran. He talked about how the Iranian regime had for decades chanted death to America. He blamed them for the October 7th attacks perpetrated by Hamas against Israel. Hamas, long known to be heavily supported by Iran. He described the regime as the number one state sponsor of terrorism, which killed tens of thousands of its own people during recent protests. He also effectively encouraged Iranian people to rise up and topple the regime. Now, that is going significantly further than US ambitions during the Midnight Hammer strikes. That is effectively calling for regime change, but also indicating at the same time that that's not something America is going to impose. He was calling on the Iranian people to do that for themselves. He talked about the negotiations. He said that America tried to make a deal, and he accused the regime of flip-flopping back and forth about whether or not they were prepared to surrender their nuclear weapons program. He said fundamentally, Iran can never get a nuclear bomb, and he repeated that in his presidential address in front of the American flag. Very formal address, although he was wearing a baseball cap with the letters USA, so formal and yet uniquely Trumpian in style.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests.